Uproar over whether Chidimma should compete in the Miss South Africa pageant. Questions of Afrophobia, questions of who we are as a country, and the incoherence of the GNU. Stay tuned. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. I'm Mpofu-Walsh, and if you're new around here, this is SMWX, where we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis videos like this. Well, where do we start? There's nowhere else to start and nothing else to talk about but this furor that has erupted over Chidimma Adetshina, who is a contestant and a last 16 finalist in the Miss South Africa pageant. And this presence of Chidimma Adetshina in the Miss South Africa pageant has caused a ridiculous amount of fire and fury for reasons that are unknown to me, because I don't see why this has become such a major issue. And I think there are deep and dangerous ways in which people are trying to whip up Afrophobic sentiment over an innocent person who is defenseless and unable to defend herself. And at times like this, those of us who have influence in the South African media landscape must rise to her defense at this point. Not because I don't know this person, but this is what has been happening in our country for a long time, that innocent people who happen to be migrants to South Africa or be connected or have parents who once migrated to South Africa, which, by the way, is like every single person in South Africa, if you go back long enough, have been victimized. We can have a conversation about a rational immigration policy. Obviously, every country needs borders and laws, and those laws should be adhered to. But that's not the conversation today. The conversation is about how innocent people get victimized on social media by political opportunists who are trying to use their power to bully those who don't have a voice and gain political and social prominence. And it has to stop. So today we're going to talk about this issue. Let me explain the background and then also talk about why I think it is just based on incoherent grounds. And it actually goes beyond the technicalities of the pageant and who is allowed to compete and who is not. This is about who is allowed to think of themselves as a South African. So we have Chidimma Adetshina, who is a contestant, as I say, and according to the BBC, was born in Soweto at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital. Her mother is South African Mozambican, or has Mozambican origins, but clearly lived in South Africa and has lived in South Africa, and she was born here, that being Chidimma Adetshina. Her father is Nigerian, and that's clearly why she was given the Nigerian names that belong to her father, which is customary. Now, the Miss South Africa pageant is like going blue in the face, saying, we have criteria, there are certain criteria, I think you have to have a South African passport and a South African ID book and be a South African citizen. We vetted the candidates, and this candidate is allowed to compete, which means that she passed the criteria, she has this documentation. And yet, for some reason, people keep trying to cast aspersions over whether these documents exist or not. It reminds me of when Donald Trump tried to question whether Barack Obama was truly a US citizen. And no matter how many times people said, the facts are the facts, and here is the document, people kept saying, yeah, but the document could be fake. And then when it was proved that the document was authorized, people said, yeah, but there was a secret person in the room who authorized the document unlawfully. You can't satisfy those who want to find different facts. This person, as far as we know at this point, was born in South Africa, and the pageant has agreed. I mean, for any other Miss South Africa pageant, has there ever been such scrutiny over the origin of the person and their citizenship? For all we know, maybe someone didn't have an ID book and they competed in the pageant. We don't know. The technicalities are one thing, but the principle is another. And the principle is, who is allowed to regard themselves as a South African? Do you have to have a specific kind of name? Do you have to have a specific kind of parents? Do you have to speak in a specific way? Do you have to have a specific kind of accent? South Africa as a country is a country of people who have come here from different places. Some migrated in early centuries AD to South Africa. Others were here through colonial conquest. Others came here because their parents believed that this was a place where they could find economic freedom in a dynamic country. We are all in some ways from many different places. And by the way, if you trace our ancestry back long enough, you will see that ideas of racial purity, ideas of cultural purity fall apart because not just South Africans, but all humans actually come from multiple different sources. You may think that you are one thing. Go and do that biological test, which shows you your DNA. You'll see that you have ancestry from Europe. You'll be surprised. Or you have ancestry from Asia, or you have ancestry from other parts of South Africa. So this idea of a pure South African is something that exists in people's minds, and it's an idea that people use to gain power for themselves and lord over others, rather than basing their views of identity on any kind of reality or fact. Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. So until some kind of major statement that the vetting was done wrong comes out, we have every reason to believe that this person was born in South Africa and is a South African citizen. But even if she was not born in South Africa, but gained South African citizenship after that, she is a South African citizen. The law, which people so desperately want to cling to when they talk about illegal immigration, the law allows people to become citizens even if they aren't born in South Africa. So it would be perfectly legitimate for someone not born in South Africa who became a citizen later to compete in the Miss South Africa pageant or at the Olympics or anywhere on a global stage representing South Africa. So this question, of course, rose to prominence, and eventually we had no less a figure than the Minister of Sport, Gayton Mckenzie, venturing his opinions. And I want to first go to his tweet and then the subsequent video after that, because there's a big deviation from what he said in the tweet to what he said in the video where he tried to walk back some of his statements. So someone asked, how do you feel about Miss SA and basically this whole question of whether she can compete? Gayton Mckenzie, Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, says, I just returned from Paris, which is interesting, from another country, and will definitely get more information tomorrow. We truly cannot have Nigerians compete in our Miss SA competition. I want to get all the facts before I comment. Isn't this already a comment? But it gives funny vibes already. Okay, so I have a lot of questions before the new interview, because a lot of this is walked back in the new interview. Number 1, this is already a comment. So you can't say, I want to get the facts before I comment while you're commenting. Get the facts before you comment, or comment. But don't comment without facts and then say, I'm going to get the facts. However, my hunch is this. Because that's not getting the facts before you comment. That's sharing your hunch without the facts. Secondly, it gives funny vibes already. What are funny vibes? Is there a legal definition for funny vibes? Because we're about law here and we're about rule of law, and we don't like anyone breaking the law like, quote, illegal immigrants. What constitutes funny vibes? Is a person's name funny vibes? Which names create funny vibes? And what is to be done with funny vibes? So to create a cloud in people's mind using these terms is dangerous when you've already admitted that you don't have the facts. But this causes uproar, and many people are concerned about the comments because it clearly puts this person in a very difficult position, could subject them to social media abuse, which has apparently been torrential for this poor person who has been very strong in not saying anything, and the pageant has said they won't comment further and she won't comment further. But as someone who has been on the receiving end of social media abuse for a long time, because that's what it's like to be in the public eye in South Africa, I can assure you it's not easy. It's not easy. And we shouldn't turn a blind eye to how difficult it must have been to think, oh, I'm going to be in this pageant, I'm going to try and do something for myself, I'm going to put myself forward, and then get a country which really turns its back and says you're not even allowed to be part of us, even though you were born here. By the way, I'm going to get to some of the just incoherence of this later, but let me try and stay on track. Okay, so then the minister comes back from Paris, and he does this video which completely changes the tweet. So let's have a look at that.
I have to go and investigate. I can't just talk because I'm a minister. And if she's South African, we will wish her well. But if she's not South African, we can't have her represent us on the world stage. Where I am sitting now, I don't know. I am waiting for answers. But they say it's xenophobic when you ask the question. How can it be xenophobic? We must ask questions. My surname is Mckenzie. There's some people that ask me, you South African? Because my surname doesn't sound too South African. I don't get offended like, no. Why are you asking me that? We must start to listen to each other. We are being overrun here by illegal foreigners. Not, the emphasis on illegal. People on the ground are feeling the pain. I can't now, because I'm a minister now, I must now stop talking about the problems. Illegal foreigners got all the jobs here. They're taking over everything. And it's a problem that we need to speak about in the restaurants. They're the only ones working.
Okay, so notice several things about this video. It has completely changed the context of the tweet, which said that this was funny vibes. There are aspersions to be cast, but he will check the facts. Now, the video is saying, I'm asking the question. But the tweet did not say, let me ask the question and I will return to you once I have the question. It created a sense of funny vibes already. So now we've shifted. It's just about asking a question. Secondly, we have this idea that this is now about illegal immigration. Who said anything about illegal immigration? The person was, by everyone in this debate has already said it's either about whether they were born here or not. So there's no question of whether this person is illegally in South Africa or not. So suddenly the ground has been shifted to talk about illegal immigration when this is not about illegal immigration. It's about the attitude of South Africans towards people who are South Africans, who happen to also have ancestry from outside South Africa. So it's a complete diversion of the debate away from the ground which the debate originally was on, and an attempt to confuse people away from this fact that because this person had a Nigerian name, funny vibes were created. So, of course, we've had lots of back and forth and lots of people intervening, but this is someone in the cabinet, right? This is not any old politician. And when people in the cabinet speak, there's a certain responsibility they have over the country. And so now there are also questions about the government of national unity, because we need to ask, what is this GNU that we have before us? Like, is it just a free-for-all where anyone can say anything and no one gets reined in, no one gets disciplined? DA ministers run off and do one thing, ANC ministers do another, they fight in the media, and then Gayton Mckenzie comes up and says this stuff, and this thing is just incoherent. And here's my problem with the double standards, right? Because on the one hand, we're told that the EFF and MK party are these extremists that have to be isolated from all forms of power. Extreme rhetoric, because they just can't be allowed to even be thought of anywhere near power. Is the Freedom Front extremist? Is coming from a history of apartheid segregation and a crime against humanity and not calling that out and being linked and tied to that history, is that extreme or not? Is this Afrophobic? It's not xenophobic. It's anti-black Afrophobia. It's also not necessarily just Afrophobia, because there are white immigrants from African countries who come to South Africa. So it's not about where you come from, it's about how you look. It's anti-black Afrophobia. Are these kind of statements extreme or not? Because if the GNU is supposed to protect the rule of law. How do statements like this conform to the rule of law? Or is the rule of law only about land and expropriation without compensation? So I want to know from all of those GNU defenders how they square this circle of extremism on the one hand, incoherence on the other. Which extremism is fine and which extremism is not fine? Which violent and unfortunate rhetoric is okay and which isn't? Because as a country, we really need to figure that out. So, just a few more thoughts on the double standards, because it's quite important that we get to the heart of this matter, right? It's not about the contestant, Ms. Adechina. It's not about Gayton Mckenzie. It's not about anything other than there's a danger that confronts the country, right? And here's the danger. This is a very unequal country where a lot of people are in poverty, a lot of people are unemployed, a lot of people are victims of violent crime. They live in informal settlements, townships, very little service delivery, very little law enforcement. And there are reasons for that. There are reasons. And I can give you two. South Africa's history of apartheid and colonialism, which many people would like to forget, but which lasted many centuries and will be with us for a long time. And the ANC government's failures to deliver basic services, to deliver policing to communities, to deliver adequate law enforcement, to deliver borders and enforce immigration laws. But then, instead of addressing the real root cause of South Africa's problems, which are behind people's suffering and their pain, it's easy to turn to the weakest scapegoat you can find. And often, the weakest scapegoat you can find is someone who comes from an immigrant background who is just trying to make a living in South Africa. And that scapegoating can become very dangerous for two reasons. Number one, it can lead to the violence and abuse against those people. And I'm talking about people who are rightfully here and have every right to be here. But it can also lead to diverting people's attention from the true inequalities in our society. Because I'm afraid that black immigrants from Africa do not own this economy. And if you think that the real problem of South Africa's structural crisis and the reason why people are suffering so hard in South Africa is because of black immigrants from African countries, you haven't understood South Africa's history or the shape of its economy. And we truly need to uproot economic inequality in South Africa. We truly need to have a fair immigration system and enforce laws under the Constitution. But we cannot devolve into a society that looks at the weakest possible victims and bullies those people to make ourselves feel better that we're somehow doing something just and fair, when it only reinforces the injustice and unfairness in our country. Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel, so why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. So just to talk about the double standards a little more. Firstly, they're the double standards about people who are in the same position as the contestant for Miss SA, whose parents are also not both born in South Africa. I believe there's a gold medalist in the Olympics, and no one has said anything about that, rightly so. But then there are also people who, it's fine if they're in the same position. We've got rugby players like Tendai Mtawarira, who is South African and who we all rejoice in, having been a brilliant player on our team. So that's fine, but this is not fine. I also don't get that. No one was asking to go and look at papers and all of that. So when do we do it and when don't we? Then there are those people who are South African, who don't live here, who bounced. But they're no problem. They actually rejected South Africa, some of them, not all of them, because there are legitimate reasons why people immigrate as well. But some just decided, even after 1994, they were like, oh, no, this ANC black government thing is not for me. I'm leaving, right? So are they also going to be, are we going to ask about them? Or we just ask about this contestant in Miss SA? Then you've got people who really weren't born in South Africa, who became South Africans. Have you ever heard a wonderful Johnny Clegg song? One of the greatest anti-apartheid musicians, someone whose music we all love, someone who I was very lucky to meet before he died. And shout out to his son, a friend of mine, Jesse. Listen to his music as well. Born in England. So should we stop listening to Johnny Clegg music about South Africa? There's just no way to look at this without realizing that we cannot constantly be victimizing people because we don't like the sound of their names. If authorities and bodies have said they are citizens like all of us. They enjoy the rights we all do, and they are just as South African as we all are. So, GNU, I have questions about the coherence, because we also had this thing about the Minister of Sport saying that he was disappointed that the Deputy Minister of Sport said that Israeli participation in the Olympics, was disappointing. So where do we stand with this GNU? Ministers say one thing, deputy ministers say another. Ministers in one portfolio can say something completely different to the policy of the government in another portfolio. And it's going to end in tears if it's not reined in very, very carefully and very soon. One other thing. So it's okay for South Africa's wealth to be taken to other countries. We drill into the rock of this country. We extract the minerals. We extract the wealth, and we list the company that does that on the London Stock Exchange. We take what is rightly South African and we take it out of the country so that the people in South Africa can't benefit from that. But none of the people who talk about illegal immigration are talking about that, about how our wealth is actually, in many ways, stolen from South Africa and has been for generations and put in these foreign tax havens and stock exchanges. That's cool, but a person who has the wrong name can't compete in the Miss South Africa pageant. If we're really going to talk about geopolitics and things that rightfully deserve to be here, then maybe we should talk about South Africa's wealth and not the name of the contestant of a pageant in Miss South Africa. So I do think, and the reason I say this, I fully expect and I know that there is a sophisticated social media network which is designed to abuse and attack anyone who comes out with this line. Because if you don't say that all people who may be illegal immigrants are evil and terrible, you get attacked. And it's coordinated, and it's well organized, and I suspect it's well funded. So I know that's coming. I know too that people are going to try and clip this long analysis, take 1 second from it, and then try to twist my words. But I know too that the people who watch this channel actually listen, and that there's a silent majority of South Africans who are decent people who really don't want to go down this dark path of demonizing and victimizing people just because of the sound of their names. And it's those people who I speak to. And that's the truth that we need to hold. So thank you for watching this episode of SMWX. Of course, this is a platform where we share opinions. Share yours down below. I look forward to hearing what you think, and keep it locked on SMWX. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Like, share, subscribe, and see you on the next episode. And in the comments. Aye.